in the dense, humid jungles of the Pacific, where every shadow could hide a rifle barrel and every rustle could signal death, one soldier became the center of whispered disbelief not because of his skills, but because of his weapon, a cheap mail-order rifle that his fellow Marines mocked relentlessly, laughing at the flimsy build, the outdated design, and the ridiculous idea that such a bargain bin gun could survive even a single day of frontline combat. Yet what none of them knew, what none of them could possibly predict, was that this very rifle dismissed, insulted, and joked about would soon become the key to one of the most mind-blowing stories of sniper hunting in the entire Pacific War. A story so unbelievable that even the toughest Marines froze when they heard the count rising, one Japanese sniper down, then 2, then 5, then 8, until by the 4th day, every man realized the terrifying truth that the soldier they once mocked was turning into a ghost hunter of the jungle, picking off elite Japanese sharpshooters who had already killed dozens of Americans. Snipers so well camouflaged, they seemed invisible, spirits among the trees, yet somehow this man, with his laughable mail-order special, tracked them with uncanny precision. And as his legend grew, the atmosphere in the camp shifted from sarcasm to awe, then to fear because everyone wondered the same thing. How was he doing this? What technique or instinct or unknown secret allowed him to hunt assassins who could shoot the wings off a mosquito at 100 yards? And what kind of man looks death in the eyes 11 times in 4 days and still goes back out into the hellish jungle without flinching? And as rumors spread, from whispers around campfires to hurried radio relays between distant units, his story transformed into a heartbeat-spiking mystery, one that gripped even the commanders who demanded reports they could barely believe. For no ordinary Marine, no average rifleman, should have been able to carry out what he did, yet this man, with a rifle worth less than some soldiers' boots, rewrote the rules of jungle warfare. And in this video, we're about to uncover the unbelievable truth of how a weapon everyone mocked became the deadliest sniper killer tool in the Pacific, and the secret that made it possible. A secret that will completely change how you think about courage, instinct, and the razor-thin line between a joke and a legend, the moment the sun rose on the 2nd day, casting long, eerie beams through the towering jungle canopy. The entire Marine unit felt a shift in the air, a strange tension mixed with disbelief, because the soldier they had teased just hours earlier was now returning from the tree line with the same calm, almost emotionless expression. Carrying the same mocked mail-order rifle butt behind him lay the body of yet another Japanese sniper, a veteran marksman known for his uncanny ability to remain hidden even while firing. And as word spread, men began gathering around him not to mock but to stare, confused, stunned, trying to understand how a man armed with a rifle, soldiers joked, could barely hit a tree from 10 feet, was now eliminating some of the most lethal assassins in the Pacific. And what made it even more chilling was the precision of each kill. Single shots delivered under impossible conditions, shooting between branches, through dense brush, uphill into cliffs, always striking exactly where it needed to. And while some Marines tried to rationalize it by claiming luck or coincidence, others whispered that the rifle itself behaved differently in his hands, as though fate or instinct guided it. Because this was not ordinary marksmanship, and it certainly was not accidental. And the jungle itself seemed to acknowledge his presence, birds going silent, insects pausing in their buzzing rhythm, even the wind holding still when he surveyed the area with eyes that observed everything, scanning vines, shadows, angles, every corner where death could hide. And soon, commanders began requesting him personally for missions, asking him to scout routes known to be infested with Japanese sharpshooters. Missions other Marines dreaded because Japanese snipers often tied themselves to treetops, painting their faces green, red, brown to blend with leaves and branches, becoming one with nature in a way that made them almost impossible to detect. Yet somehow he spotted them from improbable distances, predicting locations based on faint clues: a snapped twig, a misplaced vine, a glint of metal the size of a pinhead, the slightest irregularity in an otherwise perfect jungle backdrop, and with each sniper he eliminated, the psychological impact grew deeper. Because Japanese snipers who once terrorized Marine patrols now began relocating repeatedly, firing fewer shots, abandoning positions early, as though sensing an invisible hunter was pursuing them. And the Marines who followed him on missions began noticing a pattern. He never rushed, never panicked, never let adrenaline dictate his movements. He acted with a calm born not from bravery but from understanding, as if he and the jungle were communicating on a frequency no one else could hear. And as the sniper count rose to 6, then 7, the men who once joked about his toy rifle now cleaned their weapons more carefully, spoke more quietly, and looked toward the trees with newfound fear. Because someone, something, was shifting the momentum of war in that small corner of the Pacific hand. It all centered around one man with a rifle bought through a catalog. A weapon considered so laughable that supply officers questioned why anyone would pick it over standard issue choices. Yet now, this same rifle became the cause of late night discussions among officers who tried to determine whether to document this impossible series of kills or simply pretend it was a miracle of war. And as his legend grew, so did the stakes. For every sniper eliminated was replaced by another, more experienced, more desperate, leading to an unspoken truth settling over the Marines: the final confrontation. The most dangerous sniper of them all was still out there, waiting somewhere deep in the jungle, watching, evaluating, preparing for a duel neither man could walk away from unchanged. And that inevitable encounter would become the turning point of this whole unbelievable story in the choking humidity of the Philippine jungle, where every leaf trembled with hidden danger and every shadow could be the last thing a soldier ever saw. One American infantryman found himself mocked, dismissed, and nearly laughed out of the unit for carrying what his squad jokingly called the toy gun from a mail-order catalog, a cheap, lightweight rifle he bought using his own money because the standard issue weapon felt too heavy and slow for the kind of war he expected to fight. But what the others didn't know, what even he didn't know yet, was that this strange, underestimated little rifle would soon turn him into a ghost the Japanese feared more than entire platoons, a nightmare that could strike from anywhere, anytime, and vanish before a single enemy soldier could blink. The story begins with the horrifying moment that changed everything. Sniper's bullet ripped through the air and missed his ear by less than an inch, killing the man behind him instantly. And in that fraction of a second he realized the truth. The Japanese snipers were not just deadly. They were almost supernatural, unseen, untouchable, picking off Americans one by one from treetops, caves, and camouflaged nests so perfect that entire squads could walk under them without noticing the faintest clue of danger. And as panic spread through the unit and morale collapsed, he remembered the cheap rifle others mocked, the one he believed could give him the speed, silence, and maneuverability needed to take the fight back to the shadows. Because this war wasn't going to be won by marching in formation, it would be won by whoever could become more patient, more invisible, more terrifying than the enemy. So he climbed the ridge alone at dawn, the jungle dripping with dew and death, his heart pounding as the realization hit him. No backup. No spotter, no safety net. Just him, the jungle, the snipers, and the mail-order rifle everyone swore would get him killed. But what he heard next froze his blood. A faint click, almost like a fingernail tapping metal, coming from above his head. And in that instant he understood this was no ordinary fight. Because the sniper waiting for him wasn't firing yet. He was studying him, watching him, calculating the perfect moment to shoot. And that is where the impossible began, because instead of ducking or panicking, the soldier did something so reckless, so unexpected, that even the sniper hesitated. He stood completely still, exposed, pretending to adjust his bootlaces while his slow, controlled fingers brought the rifle up inch by inch, using nothing but peripheral vision and instinct to locate the glint of a scope high in the trees. And in a single breath he fired, not at a body, not at a face, but at a reflection so tiny, most men would never have noticed it. The shot echoed across the jungle like a promise, a declaration that the hunter had just become the hunted. And as a lifeless shape tumbled from the branches with a metallic clatter, the American soldier whispered the words that would define the next 4 days of relentless, silent warfare. one down. What followed would become one of the most unbelievable individual feats of marksmanship in World War II history. Alone infantrymen hunting elite. Japanese snipers through some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth, using nothing but determination, instinct, and a rifle everyone laughed at. Until he eliminated 11 of the deadliest sharpshooters the Imperial Army had deployed. But the real mystery, the part the Army never fully understood, is how he survived the moment on day 4 when 3 snipers surrounded him in a triangular kill zone so perfect that even seasoned scouts insisted no man could escape it alive. The answer to that, how a soldier with a cheap mail-order rifle did what entire battalions couldn't, begins with the first sniper he took down, and ends with a revelation so shocking that military investigators doubted it for decades. He didn't sleep that night, not because he was afraid, but because the jungle wouldn't let him, whispering, cracking, shifting with movements too calculated to be animals. And every rustle reminded him that the Japanese snipers weren't just killers. They were artists of invisibility, trained from childhood to disappear into bark, moss, vines, and shadows until even experienced scouts walked past them without noticing the faintest sign of human presence. After killing the first sniper, he knew the others would come for him. Not out of anger, but out of ritualistic duty. The Imperial Japanese Sniper Corps treated defeat as a stain, and the death of one of their own demanded retaliation. Especially when the killer was an American infantryman carrying a cheap rifle they believed beneath the dignity of a warrior. But he wasn't thinking about honor. He was thinking about how they moved, how they hid, how they breathed, analyzing everything with a precision he didn't know he possessed. And as the night hours crawled forward, set a plan in motion, so simple, yet so dangerous, that even he questioned whether it bordered on insanity. Instead of waiting to be hunted, he would invite them to attack. He would use himself as the bait. Stepping into open ground at dawn where visibility stretched into the trees, but concealment for him was nearly non-existent, forcing the snipers to reveal their positions with the subtlest mistakes, microscopic movements, or the faintest disruption of the jungle rhythm. As the first light crept through the canopy, he stood in a small clearing near a fallen tree, pretending to inspect a broken compass while his eyes scanned the treetops without moving his head. And he felt it before he saw it, that unnatural stillness, that tightness in the air that always came seconds before a sniper's trigger squeezed, and then there it was. Not a glint this time, not a reflection, but a tiny, almost imperceptible flutter of a leaf that shouldn't have moved, not in the stagnant, windless morning. He dropped to one knee instantly, firing not at the flutter, but at the precise angle from which a shot would come. If the enemy had repositioned behind the broad branch of a banyan tree, and when the rifle cracked, the echo of collapsing foliage confirmed the kill. But he didn't celebrate. He ran fast, low, weaving between roots and boulders because he knew Japanese snipers often worked in pairs, or worse, trios, using sacrificial exposure to lure soldiers into false confidence. And he was right. A second shot ripped into the dirt where his skull had been a fraction of a second before, sending soil spraying into his eyes. And through the blur, he saw the faint silhouette of a figure repositioning behind a rock crevice. He fired on instinct, blind, relying on sound more than sight, and when the thud came, he didn't feel triumph, he felt something colder, heavier. The jungle was learning him. The snipers were adapting. They were changing their rhythm to counter his unnatural speed and audacity. And he realized this wasn't simply a contest of aim. This had become a war of patience, psychology, and endurance. By noon, his clothes were drenched in sweat. Mud and blood that wasn't his, but his breathing stayed calm as he crawled through thorny underbrush, letting the terrain tear into his arms and legs because moving silently mattered more than pain. He reached a ridge overlooking a ravina, perfect sniper nest location, and as he scanned the terrain, something clicked. Too perfect. It was a trap. A beautifully crafted one. No Japanese sniper would choose such an obvious perch unless they wanted someone to see it, to fix their attention on it. And that meant the real sniper was somewhere else entirely. He closed his eyes, listening, imagining where he would hide if he wanted to protect a decoy nest. And then it hit him. the hollow cluster of bamboo on the opposite slope. He aimed between the stalks, fired once, and the bamboo quivered with the force of a falling body. 3 snipers down. But the jungle was not finished. Not even close. As the sun set again, he realized that they had begun to communicate, coordinating movements in a silent choreography designed to break him down mentally, physically, spiritually, because by now, the Japanese snipers knew exactly who he was, the lone American who had killed 3 of their elite marksmen in less than a day, and from this point forward, he was no longer the hunter or the hunted. He had become something else entirely, a threat so severe that they would commit their finest, most disciplined, most ruthless sharpshooters to eliminating him before nightfall of the 4th day. And he felt the shift in the air, the change in the jungle's breathing. As if the trees themselves were warning him, the real battle was only beginning. He knew by the 3rd morning that the jungle had turned into something else, no longer a battlefield, but a vast living mind studying him, adapting to him, mirroring his instincts until every vine, every root, every flutter of a distant bird felt like a message wrapped in camouflage. And as he crouched beneath a twisted canopy where sunlight fell in broken shards, he understood that the Japanese snipers were no longer acting independently, but as a coordinated organism. The most disciplined marksmen in the Pacific tuned to one another with a terrifying, almost telepathic efficiency. And he felt the pulse of their intent closing around him like a tightening net, as if they had collectively decided that he, an American infantryman with a mail-order rifle, had disrupted the natural order of the jungle and needed to be erased with absolute precision. Yet he didn't retreat. Instead, he leaned deeper into danger, moving in a slow, deliberate dance that mimicked vulnerability while hiding calculation beneath every step. Because by now he understood something they didn't. He had begun to read the jungle the way they did. Noticing the subtle displacement of moss where a boot had pressed hours earlier, the unnatural angle of a fern that had been brushed aside, the faint but distinct horizontal crease on a tree trunk caused by a rifle sling, rubbing during a sniper's careful repositioning. And the more he learned, the more the jungle revealed its secrets, as though rewarding his heightened awareness, until he could almost sense when a rifle barrel was pointed at him, even before the sniper himself had fully committed to the shot. But on the 3rd day, he encountered something he wasn't prepared for: the phantom sniper. A ghost-like figure whispered about by Marines who swore they saw a glint, a silhouette, something human just before a bullet snapped past their ears. Yet no one had ever found tracks, brass, or even the faintest sign of a nest afterward. And as he moved closer to a ravine wrapped in mist, he felt a sensation unlike anything before, a presence that wasn't watching him from the trees, but from everywhere. As if the jungle itself had grown eyes. He crouched, breathing through his mouth to avoid fogging the air around him. And then he heard it. The softest, most calculated click of a rifle safety being pushed off. So delicate that it sounded like an insect brushing a leaf, and he dropped instantly, rolling into the ravine as a bullet carved the air where his skull had been. He didn't fire back, not yet, because the shot gave him 2 critical pieces of information: direction and distance. But this sniper was different. He didn't reposition. He relocated, vanishing so completely that even the jungle betrayed nothing. Not a crushed vine, not a scraped trunk, not a displaced pebbleland, for the first time since the hunt began. The American felt outmatched, not in skill, but in philosophy. This sniper wasn't hunting him for honor or vengeance, but out of pure, disciplined perfection, the kind of warrior forged in a life of silence, patience, and lethal meditation. Hours passed. Sweat pooled under his collar. Mosquitoes gnawed at him without mercy. But he stayed motionless because he realized something shocking. The phantom sniper wasn't trying to kill him immediately. He was studying him the same way he studied the jungle, learning his movements, testing his reactions, probing the edges of his awareness. And the American suddenly understood. This was no longer a contest of marksmanship, but a duel between 2 minds sharpening themselves against each other with the jungle as the whetstone. So he decided to break the pattern. He crawled along a fallen log, deliberately exposing an angle of his helmet as a lure, while keeping his torso shielded by dense roots. And he waited not for a shot, but for hesitation. Because hesitation meant thinking, and thinking meant presence. And then it happened, a half-second pause in the birdsong above him. A faint shift in the jungle's breath that only he could detect after days of tuning himself to its rhythm. And in that micro-moment, he spun. Aimed not where the sniper was, but where a perfect sniper would be to exploit the dummy angle. And he fired. Silence. Deep, cavernous silence. Then a soft collapse somewhere far beyond the mist. He didn't smile. He didn't relax. Because he knew what that silence meant. He had just taken out the phantom sniper.
One Marine squad's feared more than ambushes, booby traps, or nighttime assaults, and killing him didn't end the hunt. It escalated it. When he approached the body, hidden so expertly beneath a natural tangle of vines he would have stepped over it if he hadn't fired precisely, he saw something that unnerved him more than anything yet. The sniper's position had been designed not just for concealment, but for endurance. Rations tucked into hollow roots, water stored in bamboo tubes. A nest built for days of silent waiting. This sniper had prepared to kill him even if it took a week, and the American understood with chilling clarity. If he had hesitated even once, if he had doubted even for a second, he would have been the one lying in the vines. By dusk, he climbed the ridge overlooking the valley where Marine units were advancing, and he suddenly realized why they mocked his rifle in the beginning, not because it was weak, but because they didn't understand what he understood now. A weapon is only as deadly as the mind behind it. And after surviving the phantom sniper, after outmatching the most disciplined marksmen in the Pacific, after turning their own jungle psychology against them, his mind had sharpened into something the Japanese snipers had never expected, a mirror of their own deadliest instincts. And the hunt wasn't over. He thought the jungle would finally quiet after the fifth sniper fell, but instead the stillness grew heavier, thicker, almost suffocating, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath for what came next. And by the time dusk turned the canopy into a cathedral of shadows, he sensed something he hadn't felt in all 4 days of stalking, evading, tracking, and eliminating the most disciplined marksmen Japan had trained. He sensed intention, not from one sniper, not from a scattered pair hidden in competing perches, but from an intelligence that felt collective, ancient, and patient, as though the entire forest had been waiting for this final confrontation, and the realization hit him with the weight of every near-death he had endured. The previous snipers weren't the full threat, they were the test, a gauntlet designed to judge whether he was worthy to face the last one, the unseen commander, the mentor behind the shadows, the master sniper Marines didn't even know existed, because anyone who encountered him never lived long enough to report him. And as he stood there, scanning the tree line with his cheap, battered mail-order rifle that Marines once ridiculed, he felt the ground beneath him resonate with a low hum of approaching danger. But it wasn't movement, wasn't footsteps, wasn't rustling. It was anticipation, a predator's silent celebration before the kill. And in that dreadful quiet, he knew the final sniper had already acquired his position. The duel had begun long before he realized it. His heartbeat slowed, his breath thinned. His sense of time dissolved, and then with a clarity that bordered on the supernatural, he realized why this sniper was different. The others fought like soldiers, but this one hunted like a philosopher, a mathematician of death, someone who didn't just aim at a target but calculated a man's psychology, predicting where fear would make him step, where instinct would make him turn, where fatigue would make him falter. It wasn't a battle of speed or range now, it was a battle of fate. And so he dropped to the jungle floor, not because he sensed a bullet coming, but because he sensed the absence of one, a void in the jungle's rhythm, the subtle vacuum created when a sniper suppresses his breath before pulling the trigger. And as he threw himself into the underbrush, a shot cracked the air, not like the others, not rushed, not probing, but surgical, a perfect kill shot that would have ended him if he had moved a tenth of a second slower. The duel had officially begun. But he did something the final sniper could not have predicted. He didn't run, didn't dive deeper into cover. He advanced, crawling directly toward the source of the shot, defying the rules of survival, because the only way to win against a mind like this was to become unpredictable, to abandon the logic that every sniper in the world relied on. And as he inched forward, letting ants crawl across his skin, letting twigs dig into his ribs, he entered a mindset he had never known, a state of focus so absolute that the world ceased to be jungle and became geometry. Angles, distances, bullet trajectories, wind corridors, acoustic pockets where sound bent or died. And then he felt it, the faintest presence to his left, not movement but intention, the subtle psychic pressure of someone adjusting their aim before taking a second shot. He didn't aim. He didn't think. He simply fired, an instinctive shot that cut through brush, through vines, through the thick breathing darkness of the forest, and the jungle answered with a sound he had prayed to hear. A soft grunt, a collapse, the death sound of someone who had lived in silence so long that even dying refused to disturb the air. He approached carefully, every step a negotiation with the shadows, and when he finally reached the fallen sniper, he froze, not out of fear, but out of recognition. The man lying before him wasn't just a master sniper. He was older, seasoned, with eyes still open and reflecting a lifetime of discipline. But what stunned the American was the weapon beside him. A custom rifle with modifications so precise it looked like a fusion of science and art. A weapon that could outperform even the best military rifles. Yet the Japanese master sniper had lost to a cheap mail-order gun held by someone who refused to give up. And in that moment, the American realized that the story wasn't about who had better technology or better training. It was about will, adaptation, and the human ability to grow stronger when confronted with impossible odds. But just as he stepped back, preparing to return to his unit, he noticed something chilling. Carved into the sniper's stock was a symbol he recognized from earlier nests, the same marking found near the phantom sniper's hide, and suddenly he understood. The snipers weren't acting independently. They weren't even a unit. They were disciples, a lineage of shadow warriors passing down techniques through generations, and by defeating them, he had unknowingly ended a tradition that had existed long before he set foot in the Pacific. The jungle exhaled. The tension dissolved, but as he walked away, a final hook struck him, a thought so unsettling he would remember it for the rest of his life. What if there were more? What if the master he killed wasn't the top of the chain, but simply the last one stationed here? What if the true architect of this sniper lineage was out there, somewhere, waiting, watching, preparing? And as he emerged from the tree line and the Marines saw him alive, mud-covered, exhausted, rifle in hand, victorious, he said nothing about the final duel, nothing about the symbol, nothing about the feeling that a new pair of eyes had already taken up the mantle. Because he knew one terrifying truth: in war, legends don't die. They evolve.